I'm a nurse in recovery. I wanted to bring awareness to the mental health of nurses and healthcare workers, especially after the pandemic. There's been an increased rate of suicide and substance abuse, and a lot of nurses and healthcare workers, they do not get the help that they need.
All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Daniel Unmanageable. This is Hard Knox Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Let's bring in Kaleigh. Kaleigh, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm doing well. How are you feeling? Are you ready for tonight?
I am. I'm excited.
Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
Not really. I'm just happy to be here, and I think that, all of us have an important message to share, so I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, let's do it. Okay, before we tie into your story, I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is ferociously supported by the Saskatchewan Union of Nurses, and we're always so grateful for their support. So, now let's shine a great big bright light on Kaleigh. So, why nursing? What made you decide to get into nursing?
I guess the idea of helping people. I have always really, I'm a very opinionated person. I have a lot of strong beliefs in certain things and advocacy. And I wanted to be able to give people a voice that maybe were vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess I think all nurses, or most nurses that get into nursing for the right reasons, they just want to help people. They want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever find yourself, like before things went sideways for you, did you ever find yourself becoming jaded towards people that would come into the hospital under the influence or struggling with substances?
I think before I recognized that I had a substance abuse issue, mm-hmm. I mean, I just didn't understand, I guess, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I was also, living with an addict when I got into healthcare as well. So it wasn't that I felt anger or anything towards them. It's a difficult situation, obviously. It's a more mm-hmm. stressful, I think, situation when you don't understand, really.
Yeah. So where did this all get started for you as far as substance use goes? Was there substance use at home growing up?
So I grew up, I had a good childhood. I lived in like a lower middle class family. We had what we needed. We didn't go to Disney World or anything every summer, but I had a good childhood. When I was younger, I want to say probably before grade school, my mom and my dad, when they were together, my dad struggled with substance abuse. I do remember some things. I remember fights and stuff at home, but it didn't last very long. They had separated, and then my mom had gotten into a relationship with my stepfather. Mm-hmm. And then my stepfather, he drank beer all the time. It was like you never saw him without a beer in his hand, but he was mm-hmm. functional. I never saw it growing up as a problem. And it really didn't affect him negatively in his life. Mm-hmm. I think my parents got into some arguments privately about it, but yeah, it was never something growing up, the childhood that I remember and that I look back on. I mean, it wasn't really an issue, I guess.
So did you, after your parents split and your mom went with your now stepfather or then stepfather, mm-hmm. Did you ever have any contact with your dad after that?
Yeah, actually my dad lives in the apartment below me now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So Um, my dad struggled for a couple of years. Again, I was very young. Um, there's some things I remember, but not a whole lot. That he had struggled. He had gone to jail. He spent some time there, and then he sobered up and he got clean. Now, I know that I don't really want to say what he, struggled with necessarily, but I mean, it was some substances and alcohol, but, he got clean and sober, and then, we were pretty young, and then we'd see him every other weekend at least.
Mm-hmm.
He did the best that he could, and he cleaned up his life.
Well, I think we all do the best that we can with the feelings and
Right.
the tools we have, right?
Mhm.
We've got, let's see, we've got a comment coming in here, a comment of support. Get this up on the screen here quickly from Chrissy Lee. RN here. It can happen to anyone. Keep up the good fight. I've seen a lot of nurses and other medical professionals fall off into some kind of addiction. Thanks for being here tonight, Chrissy. So, having seen that when you were young, having seen your father struggle, and then having seen your stepfather seeming to, excel in life, even though substances were an issue. How did that affect the way that you thought about substances, like when it came around to the first time you used substances?
So I think I kind of had this, like, I don't know. I had a view on like drugs are bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually, funny kind of, I got, like, we had the DARE program here. I don't know if you guys have that in Canada. We had the DARE program, and in fifth grade, we had to write a paper, and I actually got second place on my DARE paper. Like, I knew drugs and alcohol abuse were bad.
So for anyone, sorry to interrupt. So for anyone that might not know, I know DARE is an acronym. Why don't you tell us what that is?
Drug abuse resistance education.
See, because there's people, I have harm reduction friends walking around Saskatoon wearing shirts that have the DARE logo on it, and it's like, drugs are really excellent.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's drug abuse resistance education. It's I think they're integrating it into schools, at least here that I know of earlier. They only introduced that in like fifth grade. I know that my kids, when they were in like kindergarten and first grade, they were talking about it, which I support that. But yeah, it's just talking about, I don't even necessarily remember really what the whole program is, but it's just talking about, drugs and how they're bad, I guess, and trying to steer away from them, and talking about peer pressure and things like that. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I forgot what the original question was.
Me too.
How I viewed it. So, I mean, like I said, I was in a relationship with my children's father for a long period of time during his active addiction. And I even then, like, I would look at it like, I mean, I was angry. I was really angry, but I really didn't honestly understand. I didn't understand that his addiction was as bad as it was until I realized it was as bad as it was, I guess. Like right in the beginning, I just didn't understand, because even though I knew that, like, my dad, had struggles with drugs and alcohol, I was so young, and I really didn't see much of it, I guess.
How old were you the
My
first
mom
time you got
sheltered
loaded?
me a lot. I think it was probably about 14 or 15. I hung out with some older kids. I played sports in school. When I got into high school, I was on the cheerleading squad, and some of the older girls, they took us to a party and got pretty drunk in some kid's basement, and his parents were home, and I don't even know who they were, honestly. But
so
that was when I got wasted.
So you were mentioning, you were like, okay, well, drugs are bad and all of that. So were you of the opinion that, like, alcohol is okay, but drugs are bad?
I guess when I got into my teen years, I really just, I don't know. I don't know. I just thought it was, cool. It wasn't even necessarily that I was pressured into it. It was just kind of like, this is what kids are doing. They're getting drunk. I guess I didn't really even think that other kids weren't drinking.
Was it problematic?
I would say that at that point in time, and probably into my 20s, early 20s, I wouldn't say that I thought that it was problematic, because, like, I could control when I started drinking. Like, I would only drink, on the weekends or whatever. But, like, I never had an off switch. Looking back, I was always the sloppy friend. I was always the friend that needed to be babysat by the end of the night, you know, puking on the table. Friends had to like throw me in the shower, put me to bed, that kind of thing. Like once I started, I couldn't stop.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated high school, clearly, otherwise you wouldn't be a nurse right now. How long was it before you got into nursing? And did you always know you wanted to be a nurse? Was like this like a lifelong thing, or what did that look like?
So I think I went to, like, I graduated in 2007. I graduated high school, and then I went to like a university, and my plan was I was going to do my gen eds for 2 years commuting at a local campus.
So gen ed.
Then a general education course,
okay.
like math, English, history, all that stuff. And then it was Penn State University. And then they have satellite campuses. So I was going to one of their satellite campuses, and I was going to transfer to Maine to do my nursing program. And I just fell short of what their GPA requirement was. So I took off time. And then I had ran into my ex, and who is the father of my children, ended up getting pregnant, and yeah. And that went from there. And then that happened. So I went back and forth. I think before I got pregnant with my daughter, I kind of like bounced back and forth, and I thought maybe I wanted to be an elementary school teacher for a little bit of time too. And then I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But then once I had my daughter, then my labor and delivery nurse, I just thought she was wonderful. And I thought then I went back to nursing. When my daughter was about 9 months old, I enrolled in my community college.
And at this point, you were already with your partner that was using.
We were on and off. Off at the time, because at that point in time, when my daughter was born, at that point in time, I knew that he had a real issue with drugs. At that point in time, I don't even remember if he was in jail or what, but I was living with my parents at the time. I had moved back with my parents.
So he's going in and out of jail. Like, were you ever involved in that lifestyle with him?
So before I had my daughter, I would experiment with drugs. His thing was like opiate pain medication. He was using oxys. Like at the time they were like, I think Oxy 80s were a thing. He was using those, and then it was like Oxy 30s, and really it was ever like a bump here or there, like we'd snort it, but it was nothing that I got like addicted to. I feel like had I not gotten pregnant with my daughter, I could have ended up down. I still had like the thought where like, I'm pregnant, like I can't use drugs, right? So
yeah.
But I had experimented, and I had also experimented with cocaine with some coworkers that were not nurses. This is when I worked as a server. Did that a few times. It was never really I will say I did enjoy, the feeling that opiates gave me, but it was nothing that I became addicted to or like physically dependent upon. It was, like I said, it was literally like bumps here and there. I never sought it out, but I also remember I told you about this a little bit earlier that, or like I had like dental surgery, and I had been prescribed Tylenol with codeine at first, and then it was Percocets, and I finished the prescriptions, and I didn't necessarily have to. So
okay. So let's talk about getting into nursing. Like, after your daughter was born, you're in school, becoming a nurse. What was it like coming into, like, were you still using substances at that point? Were you drinking at that point?
Yeah, for me, I guess in the back of my mind, I was like, it's alcohol. It's, it's legal. It's not that big of a deal. It's not bad, right? So, going through school and stuff, now, let me paint a picture for you. An associate degree, typically for a student who's going full time, it's like 2 years. It took me 7 years to get my associate degree because I had 2 children in that time. I had a personal life going on with my ex, and just trying to work and provide for my kids and all of that. And I took time off, and there was classes I withdrew from just because of the stresses of my life and everything. And throughout that time, I could have like a bottle of wine, excuse me, in my fridge and like not go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, I wasn't really at that point. And I wasn't, when I had gotten so far into like my classes in college, like I kind of separated myself more and more, even just like emotionally from my ex, even though we were still together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't like partaking necessarily in that. Like when I had both of my kids, like I just like, I didn't really want to be involved in the drugs necessarily, or even like here and there. But yeah, I mean, like drinking for me was truthfully at that point in time, it was just like social.
So when did things start to go like sideways for you? And not I don't mean like at the time. I mean, looking back now, when did things start going sideways for you with the alcohol?
Things had gotten really, really bad. So my son was born in March of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
When I had gotten pregnant with our second child, he was completely planned. We wanted to have him. My ex was clean actually from heroin. He had been on heroin. I knew after he had relapsed then, but prior to that, he had just started using intravenous heroin. But then he was clean for 2 years, and in that time, I got pregnant with my son. I felt like, now looking back, I just felt like that was a huge betrayal. I was 4 months pregnant, and he relapsed, full blown, complete spiral on IV heroin. That, Dan, was such a huge betrayal for me.
Mm-hmm.
I completely lost my shit. Like I don't know. I was emotionally a wreck. I was constantly from that point in time in like a fight or flight. Like emotionally. He, from that point on, he overdosed 3 times, one of which I had resuscitated him on our bathroom floor. He was on life support. I sat at his bedside for days thinking he was going to die. He was on a ventilator and an ECMO, which, if you don't know, it's basically like a bypass. So it pumps your blood for you. It's like the highest level of life support you can be on. It was terrible. Really, at that point, I had checked out of our relationship. I was more in it because I was terrified that he was going to die. And in my mind, I felt if I left him and something happened, I was going to push him over the edge.
Yeah.
So for 3 years, it was really, honestly, that was very traumatic looking back. And that's when I started drinking more frequently to kind of cope with my anxiety.
So were you already an RN at this time?
No, I was still in school at this time. I graduated. So we're saying 2013, April of 2013 is when I resuscitated him. I graduated nursing school in August of 2017. So in that time frame, it was just a lot of, like I said, I felt like so anxious all the time. Just him going to the bathroom would set me into a panic. When I finally decided that it was time for us to part ways, it was like the 3rd time that he had overdosed. I was just like, you need to go. Like maybe somewhere down the road things can happen, but right now we just can't. And that was very, very hard for me. Mm-hmm. He was my high school sweetheart. We were together on and off in high school and stuff. It broke my heart. I didn't want to have to do that, but I had to. Yeah. And at this point in time, my life was so up and down because of this. It was really difficult for me to talk at this point anymore to my friends, my family, because they were truthfully tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
They were just like, they don't understand because they're not in the situation of loving an addict. Like they don't get it. They don't understand that I see him as a person, not an addict. And I felt like even me expressing my emotions and that just the heartbreak that I felt and the fear and the anxiety, anything I felt at this point, I was stuffing my emotion. I used to be a very emotional person, but I couldn't talk about it. I felt. And
you felt burdensome.
I felt, yeah, exactly. I felt like I was burdening other people. And I felt like if I opened up and said, I'm sad, that they were like, oh, well, you're going to take him back. That's what I did. I would. Yeah. That's kind of what would happen. So I really started to push it down. And then when I left, I didn't know who I was outside of that codependent relationship. I really had completely lost myself in it. And, me trying to cope with the heartbreak, the anxiety, the fear, all of that, parenting, being a single parent, all of that, that's when I really started to, I mean, I was downing boxes, like multiple boxes of wine a week.
Mm-hmm. So
this was about a year before I graduated nursing school.
Holy cow. So
Yeah.
you just showed up in the hospital. Like, did anyone like suspect anything? Like anyone in class, or when you became a nurse, did anyone ask any questions, or like, are you okay? Or
no, I mean, I expressed to some of my closest friends, I would say, hey, I kind of think I'm drinking too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it was like swept under the rug. Like I never drank like that around other people. I actually felt like I could control my drinking a little bit better when I was out in public. And I didn't go out because I'm my kids, I'm like trying to be responsible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would get wasted alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell, like I said, I told a couple of my friends, I don't think that nobody really got it. Nobody could comprehend, because I seemingly had it together. I was just really good at, putting on a poker face. In nursing school, we would go out after exams and we'd have a couple drinks and then we'd go home. And I could control it, like I said, when I was out at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like appetizers and a couple beers or whatever. But nobody really suspected it, even though I did tell some people, but I don't think that they really got it. Go ahead.
Can you hear when I go like that? When I go, can you hear me?
I can sense it.
Oh, can you? Okay.
And I can sense it. I'm a nurse.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So anyways, let's look at a comment here. We got a comment coming in from Francis. Francis, thank you for the comment. He just wants to add to the conversation. Francis says, I personally met medical professionals who were deeply affected by opioid addiction in the Yukon. Sad I couldn't help them back then. So when you entered into the nursing field, when you got your RN and you're out there, did you notice any of that? Like what Francis here was just talking about, did you notice any problematic substance use among peers? Now, I don't want to rat anyone out here. I'm just like in a general way.
No, actually. Diversion is a real thing. Diversion happens. Diversion is when nurses or healthcare professionals that have access to controlled substances take those substances for themselves, for their own consumption or otherwise, and take them from the patients. That's a thing. That's not something that I ever suspected with any of my coworkers, honestly, in my years of nursing. That is not something that I have ever done myself. But excuse me, I have lost looking back, actually, I never would have even suspected, but we did lose a coworker. I don't know if she was a travel nurse or not, but we lost her to suspected. She succumbed to her addiction, but she was let go, I believe, prior to that, obviously, for I think it was diversion, but it was never suspected prior to that. But then she did pass away.
Mm-hmm. So when something like that happens, when you're talking about diversion or any other, behaviors that are frowned upon, is there ever any offer of like are these seen as symptoms of a disorder, or are these just like something and punitive action is sure to follow?
So I think that as a nurse, it is in our code of ethics to hold each other accountable, to hold ourselves accountable, hold each other accountable. So technically we have our own patients, but we're responsible for all the patients on the unit. So if we see somebody who we feel is impaired, where our due diligence is to report that, right? Mm-hmm. And then that nurse or whatever could be subject to fit testing, which is, pretty much being sent to, for immediate drug testing or alcohol, testing, whatever. There are options where the boards, depending on your state board of nursing, they can implement, rather than sending you for punitive action, they can, put offer you drug treatment or substance abuse treatment, alcohol treatment, rather than punitive action. But they do have every right to hold your license if they feel that you're a risk to patients. No nurse wants that, even if nurses are not caught, nobody wants to admit that they have a problem, because most of us aren't doing this out of mouth, like it's not with bad intent, and we're, a lot of it is coping, I think, but nobody wants to admit that, because nobody wants their license taken away. Nobody wants to be seen in that light. Nurses are respected, trusted professionals. But they have every right. And some hospitals too, they can deal with it in a very secretive manner if they want to. They may keep it private, and not really report it or do anything about it. And that's that's at their discretion. They can let you go. It's really a sensitive thing. I don't think that there's enough support, though, openly for healthcare professionals to seek that treatment without, I guess, judgment or fear of losing their profession, losing their license or their jobs.
Yeah. So when you were nursing and you were still drinking, surely you had to serve people who would come in either under the influence or clearly struggling with substances. Did your own experience when you were actively still drinking and the experience you had with your now ex-partner, did that afford you any empathy when you saw people coming in that were struggling?
I think during my active addiction to alcohol, I didn't see myself as having an active addiction to alcohol. So, but of course, like, I think for a short period of time in the immediately following my breakup or separation, I felt really really anxious, I guess. So there was a couple times where I had asked to have a different assignment maybe, but I mean, it's not that I didn't feel empathy for those patients. There would be times where I would care for a patient that was an addict or something, and I would disclose to them, not that I would disclose to just any patient, but in a moment where I felt like, hey, like, I'm not judging you, like, I'm here, like, I love somebody like this, I'm not here to judge you, I'm here to care for you. So it wasn't, at that point in time, I wasn't able to put myself in their position, but I was able to say, like, hey, like, I'm looking at you as a person.
So tell us a little bit about, and we don't want to say the words too much because maybe I'm paranoid and maybe I'm like conspiracy theorist and whatever, you can judge me if you want, but tell us about your experience as a frontline nurse, struggling with substances on the onset of the schmandemic.
Schmandemic.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, so my mindset, okay, so at this point in time, I had already known that, like, I knew in the back of my mind that I had a problem. I had reached out to friends in the past. Given this point in time, I actually did. I woke up there was a point in time that I had actually woken up in the ER that I worked at because I was drunk and on suicide watch. Thankfully, my bosses were really great and they offered support. I didn't have any criminal charges from that, thankfully. But anyway, so at this point in time, so like, I knew that I had a problem. My drinking was up and down in waves. My mom had addressed it. My stepdad had addressed it. And I was just coming off of, like, seeing some guy, we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, seeing some guy who was a total D-bag, excuse my language. But, like, I took it hard. I wasn't in love or anything, but I took it hard, right? So in those times, like, my drinking had escalated. So now we're at, like, right before we're in, like, December 2019, okay? January of 2020, I was at work. This was pre-pandemic. My stepfather, who was like my dad for 25 years, I got a call while I was at work. I got texts from family saying that he was missing, which is not like him. And then I got a call at like 5:30 at my job from my mom, who was screaming, saying that my stepfather was found dead. So he had died in a tragic accident. He was found crushed by a by a construction backhoe. My little brother found him. So that was less than 2 months before the pandemic. He was 53 years old. So that was the worst time of my life. And then I had already worked on a very stressful unit. It was a 32-bed cardiac unit and stroke unit. And less than 2 months after I buried my stepfather, we come into work one day and they're like, you guys are going to be the COVID unit. Cool. We're all, at this point in time, I had moved back with my parents temporarily to get myself, just to get myself back on my feet. And I was just going to put some money aside. But after he died, I stayed with my mom. I told her I was going to stay with her. I wasn't planning on it being long term. But then the pandemic happened. She wasn't taking care of herself. I have 2 little kids at home. I was afraid because nobody knew what was going on. We didn't know how to protect ourselves. We didn't know at that point in time if it was going to kill kids. I didn't know if it was going to kill me or if I was going to bring it home to my mom who was grieving and, not taking care of herself, like I said. So that was scary. Just a lot of uncertainty, but we had to put on a brave face, I guess, because this was our job. What were we going to do?
Yeah.
And I didn't have any other option.
Yeah.
If you were not pregnant, you had to be, or you weren't immunocompromised, you had to work. So
got a comment coming in from Sherry Rivas. Sherry, I hope I said your name right there. Sherry says, you are an inspiration to us all.
She's a friend. Thank you, Sherry.
Say, yeah. So, okay. So all of this stuff happened. Now, I'm just trying to understand what that must have been like for you to when all of when COVID struck. And before we go any further, I just want to say the reason that I say schmandemic and I try not to say the C word and stuff like that is because I was watching a friend one time do a podcast, and I'm sorry to branch off here right in the middle of your story.
No, that's okay.
I was watching a friend do his podcast, Operation Tango Romeo, good friend of mine. His name's Mark Mankey. They do a PTSD centered podcast. And he started talking, they started having a conversation about that. And it kind of got a little bit heated. And then all of a sudden his stream went quiet. So I don't want my stream to get silenced because we say the wrong words in the wrong way.
Yeah. I get it. That's a part of a lot of my anger over everything.
Yeah. And who's to say it could have been some completely unrelated technical issue.
Right.
That, I just branded it that way.
Too.
Yeah.
Now we've come to a point in time too where things hopefully have cooled down a little bit. It's not as heated as what it used to be, but yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So when this was all happening and you were drinking, did this send you further into it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I want to say from January to March and maybe shortly after that, I was kind of still in shock. I wasn't really processing my dad's death. And I don't know, but after that, being my mom wasn't working, nobody was working but me. Or I felt me and the hospitals were open, healthcare facilities were open. It was and my kids, I was at this point in time, my ex was just not in the picture at this point, because he was off. I don't know. We didn't know where he was. Long story short, we didn't know where he was. So he was active in his addiction from my perspective. So I was completely alone with my kids and school had closed down. I had to be, homeschool teacher. Oof. I had to be,
That'll make anyone drink.
literally. I was under so much stress and I couldn't get away from it. And I couldn't even hide it. Like I said, my mom was already she knew, she could sniff it out. She could sense that I had a problem, and I'm right there with my mom. Mm-hmm. And, it just spiraled really.
So what did really mom have to say?
I think my mom was really just trying to, she was grieving the loss of her husband. I can't even tell you. That whole year was a blur. Like I was literally drunk that whole year.
Mhm.
I don't know when it really started going sour, like really bad. Like I know in the summer it was terrible. It got really, really bad into the fall. My mom would confront me about it. I'd black out. At this point in time, I was blacking out like every single night. Like, I mean, I was crossing a lot of lines that I didn't want to cross. Like, you know, I started hiding my alcohol, and because I was hiding my alcohol, I was not drinking at work, but that was the first place I'd go to after work, and I would hide my I would drink I went from drinking wine to drinking beer, and then drinking beer to drinking seltzers because I thought, oh, it's more figure friendly, I guess. And then I would hide it. Yeah, because
Gotta
I
watch that
gained so
waistline.
much weight. No, literally, I gained so much weight. I was swelling. I had to go see a cardiologist in this year. Like it was terrible. I was hiding my alcohol in Monster cans so that
Mhm.
people wouldn't know that I had alcohol. I was drinking while driving so people wouldn't know because it got to the point that everybody around me knew, my family knew.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I was drinking and I was driving intoxicated. It was bad. I was terrible. I'd go off on people. I'd get in fights with my family. My kids were like scared of me because they didn't know what was going to happen next, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Yeah, it was bad.
So what finally what finally brought you into recovery? Was it a pinnacle moment? Like, did something happen, or was this a progression?
This is a progression, I think. I think I got to the point that I couldn't hide it anymore. I was really good at hiding it. I could just play it off and like laugh it off like it wasn't a problem.
Mhm.
Um, I had gotten to a point that I just like I'm an intuitive person. I I can't tell you really what it was. I could sense that something terrible was going to happen. I got really fucking lucky,
Yeah.
Dan. I
Well, I
got
mean, and
really lucky.
just to throw something else in the mix here, that maybe I just have a note here that now at this point, your ex that was using so heavily, he had found recovery, correct?
Right. Yeah. 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 So in the summer, this is kind of when things really had like peaked. And it's funny. It's kind of funny because in the past, when I was starting to like drink at home, like after, all of those things that kind of pushed me over the edge while I was in a relationship with him, he would actually take note. Like, I think that you're probably drinking a little bit too much,
Mm-hmm.
even like when we were together.
And
So
how
I
did
think
that
he
feel?
also knew.
How did that feel when he said that to you? Like after the
Fuck
experiences
you.
that, yeah, it probably, hey,
It was a
yeah,
fuck you.
uh-huh.
Excuse my language, but it
No,
was. I was
it's
like,
fine.
how dare you? Like, no, like, I'm not like that. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like you.
Not doing
That's how I felt at
heroin.
the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It was like, it was that he actually explained to me, he would preach to me that there's a yet list.
What's that?
He's like,
Oh yeah,
so
yeah. I'm
yet
not doing
list, like,
that
I
yet.
haven't done that yet. You haven't done
Yeah.
that yet. And I'd be like, shut up.
I bet you that just sent you over the edge, hey?
Oh, it pissed me off. It pissed me
Yeah.
off. I
God
was like,
damn it.
you bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he knew. And so at this point in time, him and I were not really on good terms, but he had come back after like literally being absent for like 4 years.
Mhm.
We're in a better place now. I will say
Mhm.
that. So anything I'm saying here is just the way that it was. We're in a good place now, but, yeah, he came back and yeah, he was living with his girlfriend now. But he was very critical of me during my addiction at the time, kind of throwing things in my face and really just making me feel like shit at the time. But yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm very proud of him, actually. He's got over 2 years of recovery now. So I'm very, very proud of him today. But things were
Mhm.
not good at that point. My kids were adjusting to him being back, and now he wants to be in their life. And so that was difficult. My daughter, who has psychiatric disorders, um, she actually ended up, I had her hospitalized in that time in a psychiatric hospital
Mhm.
briefly. Factors surrounding that, I took her out. Everyone made me feel bad about having her in there at the time, you know. So I took
Mhm.
her out prematurely, but that was another thing too. Just years and years of dealing with a child with severe psychiatric illness and doing it alone and no one really understanding. That took a toll on me as well. That was a huge trigger.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that happened. So yeah, he came back out and then he was in recovery.
Yeah. Let's take just a quick break here. I'm just going to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's episode is also brought to you in part by Prairie Harm Reduction in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Prairie Sky Recovery Center in Leipzig, Saskatchewan, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan, and Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. To learn more about our sponsors, to get on our email list, check out our upcoming streams and more, check out www.hardknoxtalks.com. While you're there, help us support the platform and pick up some swag because it is amazing. So tell us about how you came into recovery. Like, what was it?
Okay, so like I said, I'm very intuitive. I just felt like at this point in time, up until that point, I think all of us can agree. I mean, I'm speaking for everyone, but I think we can all agree that like none of us really wanted to be clean and sober, right? We just wanted to control our use.
We just wanted the pain to stop.
Right. And I just was in denial for a really long time. And I think that I spent so much time, so many years just trying to control my use rather than be sober. But when I got to a point that I really just surrendered to the fact that like everybody knows my life is about to be in shambles. So the relationship I had with my ex, seeing all of these terrible consequences that caught up to him, I knew that if I didn't do something now, that like this isn't as bad as what it can get. And it was pretty fucking bad at that time, right? I had gotten to a point that I had written out, this is hard to talk about. I wrote out a suicide letter to my children because I remember sitting in my garage. I never told anybody this, but I would sit in my garage and in my basement, there was like beams on the ceiling. I remember staring at them and thinking like, no, that would just be easy, right? If I didn't have to do this anymore. Like I had reached out and set up, I had everything set up, but I was going to go to a rehab in Ohio, and it just didn't work out. Like I was afraid at the time that my ex was going to take the kids or something. You know, I was just in a compromised state mentally at that time. And I couldn't leave. So I just white knuckled it. I didn't know how. At this point in time, I had already tried to stop so many times. I was on naltrexone. I went to counseling. I tried to count days. I tried to do all of these things.
Did you ever go to meetings?
And it just didn't work. I hadn't gone to meetings for myself, no. I lived in a very small community, and you have to understand that given the time that I was getting sober, we were like in the peak of the pandemic too. Also, I was really ashamed at that point in time, and I didn't want anybody to know. I also didn't want to tell anybody that I was starting to get sober again because I didn't want to let anybody down.
Donna's actually got a question here. We're going to let her ask.
So I was just curious, what is naltrexone, I think you called it?
Yeah, so naltrexone is Vivitrol.
What's Vivitrol?
So Vivitrol is actually so in this time where I was drinking, I had gone to, because I was trying to find some way to get sober. So I went to a drug and alcohol counselor, and I was seeing this therapist. It really didn't work out for me because every time I left, I'd stop and get wasted. But she was telling me, she was like, you know, she had worked in a rehab before, and she was like, Vivitrol, heroin or opiate users, it's a way for them, it like blocks the neurotransmitters or the receptors in their brain so that it doesn't help with withdrawal. It just kind of like stops craving somehow. And it's for opiate addiction. But there was studies, she said, that showed that it worked in some cases of alcoholism. So she told me, she's like, go ask your doctor. So Vivitrol is typically given in intramuscular injections. For I don't know how frequently they get them, but in pill form, the generic name is naltrexone.
Okay.
And so I went to my family doctor, and I was open with my family doctor too. And I was like, you know, I'm having problems stopping drinking, and I said, this is what my therapist told me. So he wrote the script. It didn't work for me. I ended up drinking while I was taking them. So, yeah. I mean, I think definitely, I'm sure it works for some people. It just didn't work for me.
So now you found recovery. You
Mhm.
So you said you just white knuckled it though. So, you know, and some people may say like, oh, that's not recovery. Like you're just a dry drunk now. So what would you say to somebody who might be thinking that right now?
So for me, it wasn't like I have been at that point where I've been a dry drunk, where I didn't change things in my life. Um, I didn't make the necessary changes in my life that I felt like I needed to create a healthy environment for myself.
Mhm.
I didn't, after I had gotten sober, I had just gone through the motions of waking up every day and just feeling like shit and,
This
doing
is
all
life
that
now.
and trying to, this is like, right. And I had gradually stopped, I would only drink maybe when my kids were at their dad's every other weekend. And then I just slowly just kind of stopped. And like I said, I don't know how it happened, but it did. And then once I had gotten to the point that I felt comfortable, I didn't go to meetings, but I did get myself into therapy, and I did Zoom therapy because for me, it felt less overwhelming having to get up, get out of the house, find a babysitter, go do all these things. So I was able to find within my employee assistance program through the hospital, I was able to get into like Zoom counseling like this. And that actually worked for me for several months. And then after 3 months of being in recovery, I remember I made a post like on Facebook, and then I started actually telling people that I was sober.
Just outed
So that
yourself.
way, yep, I outed myself because at that point I felt comfortable, that I felt like I was like, I feel good, I feel healthy, I'm starting, I'm doing these things, I'm taking these steps for myself, and now I just want other people to hold me accountable.
Yeah. So you can basically, you can say, I can say that I've quit and mean it.
Exactly. Right. I wasn't letting myself down, and I wasn't letting other people down. I wasn't a disappointment at that point.
What did work
I
say?
didn't feel like I was. My bosses at the time, they were amazing. I'm so thankful that I had them. The assistant manager at the time, she's now a nurse practitioner, by the way. I'm very proud of her if she's listening, but she actually came down into the ER that time when I was on suicide watch, and she actually lost her father when she was a kid to suicide. So she's very aware of mental health. She's always been there for me when my dad died, and she came down, like I said, in the ER when I was there in a very vulnerable moment. She didn't judge me. She would always call me into her office and just talk to me. My bosses were amazing. They really just wanted to see us succeed in life in general.
So let's move forward now. So now you found recovery, you found some stability in your life. Tell us how you use your lived experience now as a nurse.
So once I, in my recovery, I ended up leaving the small community where I lived, and we'll just say the schmandemic took a toll on my mental health. You're welcome.
Thank you for considering my mental health.
Yes. The closed-mindedness, we'll say, of the community that I lived in was just not good for my mental health. And I ended up actually, and I think being in the environment where with my dad passing, and it was just depressing, and I just needed to go. So I left, and now I live right outside of Philadelphia. That's where I'm at now. And I have support with my dad. When I took myself here, there was quite a few instances where I had patients who, especially in this area, there's a lot of addiction in this area. I think it's more pronounced, but anyway, we would have patients come in that were, they weren't there for detox, but they were there for other things, but they comorbided, or they had a comorbidity or a coexisting disorder of addiction or substance use. And I don't think that nurses and healthcare workers do this with malintent. It's just ignorance, really. They don't understand. So it's just kind of like, it's an addict. Yeah. They're probably going to leave against medical advice. So they're not going to want to do this. They're not going to do that. It got to the point that I was just like, I was like, I'm going to take them. Just give them to me. And I was open about the fact that I was in recovery myself. And so when I'd have addicted patients, like I was then able to put myself in a situation like they were like, oh, well, this patient is just like really, really moody. And like, I'm like, well, it probably feels like shit, So I'd go in there and I'd be like, hey, like, listen to me. Like I'd have to I'd get down. Like, I don't mean on their level. I mean, on like physically get down. Because some of them were like on the floor, on the cold floor. And I'd be like, listen, like, I'm not here to judge you. Like, I myself, and I said, I don't tell all my patients this. I said, but I'm an alcoholic and I'm in recovery. And I'm like, so I'm not here to judge you. Like, I sincerely want to help you. Like, I want to be able to advocate for you and find out ways in which I can help you. So having that, I've helped several patients stay in the hospital rather than leave. I've advocated for them to have medications that would ease their withdrawal, to get them through maybe their antibiotic course or whatever it is that they're there for. Because patients in acute care hospitals and medical hospitals, they're not there to detox. They're there because they have some other condition that they need to be treated for, but they also need to be treated for their withdrawal. So I was able to do that and advocate for them.
Yeah, because I mean, when we were talking before the show, you were talking about situations that you had been in where people would just, like the staff would deny them maintenance.
Yeah.
They would deny them methadone or whatever they needed to just stay comfortable while they're being treated.
Right. So this had happened even like prior to me being sober, but like I've seen it several times where just because this would be like a patient coming in that's diabetic and we're not giving them their insulin. Addiction, someone coming in and they have like an infection of some sort. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, an addict comes in, they have pneumonia, okay, or they have an abscess or something, and it could have been from a bad injection site or whatever. But let's just say, for argument's sake, it's pneumonia, okay. So they need antibiotics, very benign condition, and just some hospitals, they're just not trained or they're not competent in addiction, and they won't offer patients, methadone if they have a coexisting opiate addiction. Like, they're there to get treated for pneumonia, for a medical condition, and they have this chronic substance use disorder, this opiate addiction. And so we need to be able to give them this medication to prevent their withdrawal. By us denying them that, and then they get sick and they're in withdrawal and they feel like shit and they want to go and leave, and you'll walk down the street and find their dealer or whatever. Like, who can blame them? We're not treating them appropriately, right? But we call it AMA. We make them sign a form that says against medical advice. And I don't know how to go about fixing that, but it's a systemic problem where in my personal opinion, it's medical neglect. Yeah. We are neglecting to treat their substance abuse disorder or their substance use disorder.
We've got a comment here, actually a bit of a conversation breaking out in the chat here, and I think it's interesting. I bring it into the stream. So we've got Jake here. Jake, thanks for watching tonight, and thanks for the comment. Thanks for joining the conversation. Jake says, I cannot believe how many doctors and people in the medical field overprescribe medications to fill their pockets. Do you think that's a generalization? Like, does that really happen that often?
I've watched, I'm not going to speak a whole lot on it because I don't want to say the wrong thing, because the height of the opiate, like when that, or I don't want to say the height, the beginning of it, I know that it was like a big problem, that things were being overprescribed and there was, written prescriptions were handed out. And I don't necessarily think that it was all, I don't know. I don't know if there was a kickback. But there have been a lot of, protocols and policies that have come into play over the recent, don't ask me specifically what they are, but it has tightened. The restrictions, I think, have tightened so much so that even there's people that need these medications and they don't have access to them. But I've watched documentaries and things like that about big pharma and all that stuff profiting. And I won't say that doesn't happen, but as a bedside nurse, that's not something I really know. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's not the kind of stuff I'm dealing with.
Yeah. We've got another comment from my friend Mark. Mark, I forgot about you, man. We got to bring Mark on the show here. He's Saskatoon boy here. He's got some good things to say. So, but anyways, Mark, thank you for the comment. Thank you for joining the conversation. Mark says, I do not think that all doctors are this way. Sometimes these prescriptions help folks that really need it. Generalizing is dangerous. If folks need the help, I sure hope they get it.
Yeah. So no, not all doctors are that way, but so I'm speaking about my specific experiences, you know what I mean? And this is a handful of experiences and the millions and millions of interactions that happen between nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, and addicted patients. but these are just specific instances, and part of our job as a nurse or as nurses is to advocate for our patients, no matter what.
So with this policy being, now I don't know, maybe it's not like technically a policy, but you say that people who are struggling with addiction coming in to get treated for other things are being denied maintenance medication. Now,
I think it's a lot of pushback, and maybe not even necessarily just outright denying.
Okay.
Some hospital, I know. There was a point in time that it was a few years ago, maybe, that there was a point in time that it was just like the hospital didn't have methadone, or the hospital, like, that was like the only way that they, like, we didn't carry Suboxone, and we didn't necessarily, handle methadone. I even know that, like, in county jails, like addicts that go into county jails, I mean, for like a minor drug charge, and they're on a methadone maintenance program, and they go into jail and they end up relapsing because jails don't have the methadone, or they deny the methadone after a couple days. It's a systemic problem.
So
and this is all handled by the medical professionals within the jail and in the hospitals.
Yeah. Well, and we've got a comment here from Jake saying, what did he say here? They don't have any empathy because they don't understand, and that's why the power of lived experience. And I'm not going to say that people should go out and mess their life up so they can have a better understanding. But those of us who we have a unique gift, and we should have a seat at the decision-making tables when it comes to policy, when it comes to helping people live a safer way, whether that's through abstinence or not. Right.
Right.
So, so what I'm wondering though, is when you're in this environment where people are being denied, maintenance type medications like methadone, like Suboxone, how do you advocate for that for them? Like, what do you say?
Well, so you just ask questions. I ask a lot of questions to the patient. Like, specifically, this one patient will just say the name was Joe, just out of, privacy. He was on a methadone program, he said previously. And I thought, well, hey, like, what's the clinic's name? Like, let me see if I can call, being a nurse, let me see if I can get some information. Maybe when you leave here, maybe we can get you into the methadone program again. Or trying to figure out how long ago was it that he was on the methadone program. And if it was recent, what was the dosage? And like getting this information, like he may be telling me, but I also want to get that information from the clinic. And then giving that information to the doctor, maybe having him sign a release of information, being able to talk to him in a very cordial manner, getting, being like, do you trust me to do this? I'm going to call the clinic, yada, 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 get this information. And then explaining to the doctor, having this whole picture, and trying to explain it in that way. And sometimes doctors don't like what we have to say, but, it's just part of advocacy, Really, you're just trying to get a whole picture of each individual patient and what they need. And then, being that voice. Because sometimes, whether it's an addict or just a normal patient, sometimes, even the patient can't really verbalize exactly what it is or have it come across in a way that they get taken seriously, I guess. Yeah. Not that the doctors necessarily don't want to, but sometimes it's just nice to have that, that picture painted by another healthcare professional. Yeah. Like I said, we don't always get what we want, but we fight really hard for our patients.
And that was my next question was, are you usually successful when you have to advocate for these people?
I think I am. It was more difficult being a nurse for a travel agency at a hospital where the doctors didn't really know me. I felt like I had a very good rapport with the doctors that I worked with at the hospital I was at for about 4 years. And they trusted me. So they knew me and they trusted me. But I say, even now that I work in home health, I say to my patients, I'm going to be their little bulldog. And I don't stop until I get the answer I want necessarily. So
they see you coming and they just sign the paper. It's like, oh, fuck, she's coming. Just
yeah. But I always say that I'm like, I don't look like I'm mean. Not that I'm mean, but I was like, but I get shit done. So whether it's, like I said, whether it's this or it's anything, that's my favorite part about being a nurse, especially now, is being an advocate.
What is going on here? Chrissy Lee says, I've only gotten the doctors to give Librium for alcohol withdrawals. What's Librium? I've never even heard of that.
It's a psych drug. I haven't given it a whole lot. They use it. It's not really all that effective. It's really difficult. I don't know why it's so difficult. I'm sure that Chrissy can attest to this too. It's just difficult asking a doctor for a narcotic for an addict, even though that's what they need.
Yeah,
So for an alcoholic in withdrawal, typically we like to give them Ativan, which is a benzo. It's like a Xanax, but that's what they need. It's the most effective, and giving an opiate addict an opiate to prevent it's just like, they're like, why would I do that? It's, if they don't understand it.
And finish their treatment so that we can like help them.
Exactly. And that's that's the point that I'm making. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to me that when I see situations like why would I do that? We're talking about harm reduction. We're not talking about harm elimination. Like we're gonna be like, so what situation will bring the least harm to this person? Like being sick and twisted out and running out the front door because they can't take the sickness anymore, or being comfortable while you complete the treatment so that they can go on and live a safer life.
Right. And this is why I've gone back to school now. I'm working on my bachelor's degree now, and my goal is to get either a master's in public health or a master's towards my nurse practitioner for mental health. I know that I want to work somewhere within, if I do public health, within harm reduction, especially where I'm at now. I don't know if you've ever heard of Kensington in the Philadelphia area. It's like a huge, it's one of the biggest open drug markets in the United States.
We've heard several of our guests. We've had guests from Philly. I don't know if you've ever heard of Savage Sisters Foundation.
I don't think so. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, they're in Philly, and they're heavy into the harm reduction advocacy and outreach, and they've got a number of houses that they run to reduce the harms in people's lives down there. Sarah, I call her Savage Sarah because that's just that's how I remember her. It's Sarah from Savage Sisters. So yeah. So, and also our friend Chauncey Beeston, creator on TikTok, she heads down to Philly sometimes and helps them out, the Savage Sisters out down there doing all stuff. They've got all kinds of stories about Kensington.
Just the opportunity that is surrounding this area is to help people in harm reduction and or mental health and substance use. It's really fueled a passion in me to continue and go back to school and have these goals. So yay, recovery.
yeah Donna wants to chime in here for a sec. What's going on, Donna?
So I hope this isn't like a dumb question or whatever, and maybe
no dumb questions.
Okay, good.
My experience as a tradesman says that's not true.
Well, I welcome all questions.
Okay. Awesome. That's the answer I like to hear. So getting back to in the hospital, when you have somebody come in with addiction, and we're talking about making them more comfortable so they stay, and the difficulties in maybe broaching that with the doctor. Is it possible that doctors, or most doctors, don't necessarily understand the degree of the sickness? Because I remember when I was in very early withdrawal, Dan and I, we Googled, because we had no idea how long we were going to be feeling like this. And it said, 3 days it'll peak and it's cold and flu-like symptoms. And I was like, you've got the fucking bubonic plague. Who's got cold and flu like this? Right. And so I'm wondering if there's a disconnect with the medical field. Do you feel that way?
I do. And like I said, again, I don't want to make a generalization because I know a lot of wonderful doctors and nurses. And so, most of us are good, right? But it's just the lack of understanding, I think. And also doctors, realistically, I think a lot of people don't really realize. I've had patients actually say, wow, I didn't know that nurses did all this. Nurses are at the bedside all the time. I mean, they're the ones that are caring for you all the time. Doctors they're wonderful, but doctors really, they only step in and get just a quick snapshot of the picture. And that's why nurses are so important. And that's why advocacy is so important. And so we should constantly be doing that and constantly be talking to our patients and trying to get the whole picture. doctors just don't see it. And, and then at that point in time, that's when the nurses or the doctors need, to have an open mind and hear at least what the nurses are trying to portray to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we've got some pretty good conversation going on in the chat here. Both Mark and Jake, we've already displayed some of their comments. We can't display them all, but Jake, let's see here. Where did it go? Yeah, Jake's talking about how people in the medical field and law enforcement are truly selfless, wonderful people. He goes on to say, I respect and love both. We have people who abuse power in all fields. So it's not a slur at all. I think he made a comment that maybe have gotten a little bit misinterpretive. It was sort of a generalizing
I was like, who am I
comment.
making mad?
Yeah. No, I don't, it didn't come out. It maybe didn't come off right, but Jake, we love you, man. We get you. We're glad you're here. We understand what you're saying. We do have a couple of comments here. Let's see. We got Kaleigh. Our friend Kaleigh from Saskatoon here, also a nurse, saying, go nurses!
Woo!
Yeah. We've got, how do you pronounce that? Kyra? On the screen.
I don't see it. Oh,
Kiara.
Oh, Kiara. That's Kiara.
Yeah.
That's my
Kiara
name.
says, Kaleigh is a wonderful woman, and I am so proud of all that she has accomplished. Kiara, I'm sorry I butchered your name. If it makes you feel any better, I do that at least several times every show. So it's not just
She's very
you.
understanding.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Got another one here from Angela. Angela, thank you for your comment. Angela says, proud of you, here to support you.
Aw. She's a nurse I used to work with when I was an aide.
Cool. We've got Kip. Kip Wolf
That's my
saying,
uncle.
love you, Kaleigh. Auntie Christine and I are so proud of you. Stay strong. We love seeing family in the chat.
He's sober too.
Oh, wow.
Over 3 years.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, we've gone over time, and I allowed it because this is an amazing conversation and so important. I'm just noticing now that we never did get your fan completely turned off. So that moving shadow has been going in the background this whole time. And before the show, that fan was going, and I'm like, we got to turn that off. That's going to distract the shit out of me.
You know what? You didn't get distracted. So it must have been a good conversation.
Yeah, it must have been. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your experiences with us. And thank you for just telling us a little bit about advocacy in the health services field and what it's like for you out there. And we were really grateful to have you. And is there anything you'd like to say before we let you go?
Honestly, no. I just want to say that if any of you or even people that I know, if you're not following Hard Knox Talks, they have an amazing platform and they're doing so many good things. So much so that after we got to talking, that I have subscribed to your page because I really believe in what you guys are doing, and thank you. And this has honestly been an honor for me. So I really look up to you and Donna. You guys are doing really wonderful things.
Well, thank you, and we hope that you. We hope that you stick around, that you stay as active on the page as you have been. I always love seeing your comments. You're always so engaging with our community, and we really just appreciate that so much because we really need service providers with that lived experience who are willing to get loud about it. So on that note, I will let you go. Take care for now, my friend. It was an honor. We'll see you again.
Yes. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Dan.
All right. If you're getting something out of what we are doing here, you can find all our audios on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like watching the videos, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook, live and interactive, twice a week. We love what we do, and we love that you're here with us tonight. And on that, we will let you